And welcome into the Hustle Show podcast for this Hustle Short on Tuesday, September 26th. I'm Mark Zinno, joined once again by Adam Trigger, a back-to-back day of Zinno and Trig. Boy, they must be tuning in for other people thinking that we're not going to be here, Trig, but nonetheless, we are back-to-back days here. So let's break our arm real quick, patting ourselves on the back last night because, well, the whole world was on the Buccaneers last night. You and I said on the Hustle Short yesterday, Eagles, Eagles, Eagles. And Eagles was the right side. So we will do our quick victory lap and get it over with here. But the bottom line here is that Bucs were frauds, and I think you and I both felt the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about the over yesterday, which did not get there. But for the most part, the game kind of played out how we expected it to. I thought the total was a little low. I thought the Bucs maybe would have done a little bit more in garbage time at the end of the game once they started to get down a little bit. But the game kind of went the way we said it would. I thought it was going to be a real tough sort of scenario for the Bucs. It just didn't set up like a game that was a favorable spot to them. And the Eagles got there relatively easily.
All right. As we always do here on Tuesdays, we'll get to an NFL game each, and then we'll talk Survivor, get you guys some Survivor picks. Last week, we had some winners and we know some people took some hits. So if you're still alive, you'll want to pay attention to that, Trig. But I'll turn it over to you here. Best game on the board. And the one game that I circled the fastest and quickest, Buffalo Bills hosting the Miami Dolphins after the 70 spot the Dolphins put up. And the Bills laying 2.5. I see some threes popping up already in the marketplace here, Trig. What are we doing?
Yeah, so those threes are starting to pop up, which is sort of like the quick buyback. So I saw this open 3.5 some places, and I was shocked. It's what I would have probably made the line Bills minus 3.5 for. I was just surprised they opened it there and then got bet to 2.5. So comes as no surprise that this is coming back toward 3. I expect this to kind of go off in the 3.5 range. I took minus 2.5 with the Bills as a client play, 4% play. Listen, Mark, you can't score 70 points and then not be a little bit overvalued the next week. I think that's what we're seeing a little bit with the Dolphins here. The other thing I think it's worth pointing out is the majority of the Dolphins' offense has now been accumulated against two pretty poor defenses. I think the Broncos made a pretty solid case last week that they're the worst defensive team in the league because the week prior they got lit up by the Commanders. Then they go out and give up 70, and the Commanders scored 3 points against the Bills in a game they were pretty much shut out for the duration of the game. So the Chargers have also been sort of a terrible defensive team. And that's where the majority of the Dolphins, we're talking up this Dolphins offense, but most of it's come against those two teams. The Patriots game was a competitive game. I mean, Miami, their offense looked serviceable, like good in that game, but 24 points. I mean, they didn't really win that game by like just running up and down the field on the Pats. That was a pretty hard fought game. Patriots actually probably deserved a chance to tie at the end there. I thought that call was the wrong call. That, kind of cost the Patriots the drive that could have potentially, tied that game up late. So here against the Bills, this will be the toughest defense that the Dolphins have seen all season. They never play well up here. I've gone to this game a handful of times. I went last year, Bills Dolphins at Highmark Stadium. It was on a Saturday night. The Dolphins were more interested in the snowballs being thrown at them on the sideline and just never really they played a good game, but the Bills always just sort of had the upper hand, I felt like. And I feel like that's going to be the case here. Listen, this is a good matchup for Josh Allen. Like the Dolphins secondary is not very good. The Dolphins also don't get a ton of pass rush going. And that's where I think they're going to really struggle here because either Allen's going to have time to throw or they're not going to get home and he's going to be able to make plays with his legs. And that's sort of when he's at his toughest, right? That's when Josh Allen is going to beat you, is when he's got time or when you don't get home on the pass rush and he can take off. I think that's when the Bills offense is as at their most effective as well. So I just don't see how this is a good spot for the Dolphins. Listen, I've been wrong on them so far this year. They've covered every single game. I've only got burnt once. It was last week with the Broncos. I think we even, gave it out and talked about it on this show. But I'm coming back. I'm going to take a shot. I think the Bills are the superior team here. Allen should be able to get out of the pocket and make plays, and the Bills defense will be the best defense the Dolphins have seen this year. Finally might get some pressure on Tua. I think this is going to be a different sort of test for the Dolphins, and I can't see them passing it. I laid the 2.5 with the Bills, 4% play.
All right. There's some connectivity where I'm going to go here. If you start doing connecting all the dots, or if then, therefore kind of deal here. Commanders and Eagles on Sunday, where Washington right now is catching 8.5 points. There are some eights out there, but I'm seeing 8.5 as well. You spoke about the Commanders and what happened to them in their game against Buffalo. Buffalo is a real defense. For whatever reason, people want to downgrade the Buffalo Bills. I don't know why. They're the best team in the AFC East. Okay, I know, and they're going to prove it this week because I agree with you 100% on the Bills over the Dolphins. But, they shut down a Commanders offense that looked, pedestrian. Of course, Sam Howell threw 4 interceptions in that game. So the Buffalo Bills defense is really, really good, and it travels and it plays really well. Because the Commanders scored 3 points, and because we see the Eagles look like they got right last night on national TV, this original line at 7.5 has now moved to 8.5. And I think we're going to get some value here on the Commanders. Why? Because the Eagles definitively still do not look right, particularly on offense. Jalen Hurts wasn't spectacular last night. He had 1 touchdown and 2 picks. This wasn't a passing offense that made you feel like they were going to move up and down the field. Why were they able to do so at such ease? Well, guess what? Tampa Bay's not good. And despite what we saw from them in the first 2 games, they aren't good. So the Eagles took advantage last night of a bad team that played over their heads the first 2 games. Washington's defense, I know that they've given up a lot of points in the last 2 weeks, but it's still a talented defense up front. Remember last year, Trig, this 4-5 Commanders team waltzed into Lincoln Financial Field against an undefeated Philadelphia Eagles team that was 8-0, and they came out and they won the game with Taylor Heineke 32-21. I see a very similar situation unfolding here. All the same components are in place with the exception of Sam Howell and Taylor Heineke being there. I still don't think the Eagles are right, both offensively. Their pass defense is really bad. I think the Commanders could take advantage of it because they have much better weapons across the board than Tampa Bay does. And, oh, by the way, they have a running game. That's the other thing that they have. Now, the one thing the Commanders will have to do is they'll have to slow down DeAndre Swift. We've seen clearly that Swift is going to be a guy that's going to be very tough to bring down. He had a great game on the ground last night against what it was and has been for years a good Tampa Bay run defense. But if the Commanders can do that and force Jalen Hurts to throw, I'm not necessarily 100% sure they can win the game. I think they can because, it's a division opponent. Obviously, the number doesn't matter as much when it comes to division opponents. The Commanders are not a team right now that deserves to be 8.5-point underdogs to the Eagles. Some of this is home field and everything else. But regardless here, this is a lot of points for the Eagles to be laying. I don't trust them to cover this number. I think they could win the game probably by a field goal, but I'm going to take all 8.5 of these points with the Washington Commanders next week on the road at Philadelphia.
Yeah, Mark, I totally agree there. Listen, it's really tough to play a good defensive game when your team turns it over 5 times. I don't care what team you are. It's virtually impossible to keep the other team off the scoreboard and play a good defensive game if your offense turns it over 5 times. It's hard to believe that they're going to do that again. Of course, I guess it's a concern with, young quarterback, what have you, but the Commanders defense is the real deal. I still think they are. And so, I there's absolutely no way I'd come out and lay points with Philly here. I definitely lean with you. I don't know if it'll make my card, but we'll see. That's certainly the way I look at that game would be to take the points with the Commanders. And it's a good segue because there is no way I'd be playing Philly in Survivor this week.
Well, there you go. It's not the pick that I want. At the top of my Survivor list, and again, we talked a bit about this yesterday on the Hustle Short, that a lot of 3-point spreads, 3.5-point spread, things are relatively close. You see the big spread with Washington and Philadelphia. We saw that. Obviously, the 14 points with Arizona and San Fran. You get 9.5 with the Jets and KC. You get an even 7 with Dallas if you'd like to go back there. But those are the biggest spreads. Everything else is around a field goal. I guess the Chargers laying 6 with the Raiders, but I would absolutely not take the Chargers in Survivor in this spot. In fact, the Chargers win every game by 3 or 4 points, so the Raiders also might make my card going on here. But at the top of my Survivor list right here, and I don't really care who the quarterback is the New Orleans Saints. I'll fade Tampa Bay again in this spot. Tampa Bay on a short week, going on the road to the toughest place to play in the NFL with a very good Saints defense. The other way to play that game, by the way, Tampa Bay team total under, but I like the Saints here to bounce back after blowing a 17-point lead in the fourth quarter. I think the Saints get back and get a win here in Survivor.
So, Mark, I usually don't have a ton of sharp action to report this early in the week. We usually save that for the live show on Thursday, so definitely tune in on Thursdays because for the most part, it's been decent. Last week it wasn't, but for the most part, it's been decent. They had accounts have already hit Saints. So just for what it's worth, they took 3 with the Saints at like reduced juice, 3 minus 105. I don't know if they're front running potential good news at the quarterback spot for them. I'm not sure. I don't know. No, I can't really provide like context as to why, but there is sharp money on the Saints at 3. So as far as that sort of plays into Survivor, I think you have a couple options, right? You either have to gamble, right, and go with like a team like the Bills or a team like the Saints, this 3-point favorite that you like that you like to win, that could win a home game and get you through. I agree with you. The Chargers should be on that list, but I'm not really looking to play the Chargers. I would not want to back the Chargers against the Raiders. There, it feels like a spot for the Raiders. I'm kind of in agreement with you. Interested to see who the quarterback is in that game for the Raiders, but I think there might be a bet there on the Raiders. So I too have no interest on the Chargers. After that, you've got your touchdown favorites. But the problem with your touchdown favorites is, do you want to use a team like the Cowboys here against a tough team like the Patriots and burn them for Thanksgiving? Do you want to use a team like the Chiefs on the road if you still have them available and burn them for Christmas? Those two, like, I'm not saying that I don't have much to say against either pick. It's just the situation is not good enough for me to want to use either of those two teams and burn them for the holidays. So Cowboys and Chiefs pretty much out for me because of the situation. It's not like last week, right? Chiefs last week was a layup. I said on this show, like, Bert used the Chiefs because it was a layup last week. Them going to the Jets is not really like a guaranteed thing. That's still going to be a road game. And I just wouldn't burn the Chiefs, which brings me to the 49ers. I said it yesterday. I will say it again today. They are by far the best choice for this week. I don't think you need to worry about saving the 49ers because there's other options on both holidays. Remember, Thanksgiving also includes Black Friday. So that Dolphins-Jets game on Black Friday is part of the Thanksgiving week. So I think a lot of people might that are playing circa Survivor might not realize that the Friday game counts for the Thanksgiving week. So you actually have 4 games to choose from there. And then, of course, 3 on Christmas. But again, if you use the Chiefs, you're probably in good shape saving the Eagles. So I would not really worry about saving the 49ers just because they play on both holidays. This is the spot to use the 49ers. They are a 2-touchdown home favorite against a Cardinals team that just had a massive win. I just think there's 0 chance the Cardinals win this game. So why even mess around, Mark? Just take the 49ers, 2-touchdown home favorites, and move on. That's kind of how I'm looking at Survivor.
I tend to agree with you. I mean, again, with all these close spreads, I would hold on to the Cowboys just because I think that if you're going to take a big number, right, both the Cowboys and 49 on those holidays. So I'd rather let the Cowboys develop a little more, work around the Trevon Diggs injury and the injuries to the offensive line that they had this week. It's just not a prime spot. They'll probably win that game, but why make it a sweat when you don't have to? A couple other Survivor games maybe of no. Would you take the Jaguars in London?
So, probably not. Like and the only thing is, Mark, you know what it comes down to me is it's because Atlanta played so poorly last week, right? Like, if Atlanta had gone in there and won that game, and then of course the Jaguars off the embarrassing loss, which we told you not to use the Jaguars last week. If you watched our shows, we said don't use the Jaguars, and of course half the pool gets knocked out using the Jaguars. But listen, I don't want to fade the Falcons coming off of the way they played last week because they should play better. And it goes back to something that you and I have talked about since the summer, not really wanting to bet this Jaguars team. For me to jump in with the Jaguars at any capacity, they're going to need to get more undervalued than they even are after losing to the Texans. Maybe if they lose this game, then next week, people will start to jump ship and we can jump in with them. But it would be Falcons or pass here, I think, for me. I'm just much, much higher on the Falcons.
Excuse me. Let me throw one more at you. Just because of his situation. I know I don't like to take road teams per se, but if it develops that Bryce Young is back under center, would you consider the winless Vikings on the road at Carolina?
Me personally, I will not because it's Carolina or pass there for me. But I think if it is Bryce Young, it makes it a little bit more desirable for the Vikings, in my opinion. I talked
Yes.
about this game a couple times already this week. I think Carolina's better right now with Andy Dalton under
Very
center.
good.
Their offense looked a lot better this week. Here's the key for this game, Mark. Keep an eye on the injury report for the Panthers defensively, because that's going to probably determine who wins this game. If the Panthers are down like 3 defensive starters, because here's what happened on Sunday is the Panthers ended up in the second half down a couple of starting defenders, and all of a sudden the Seahawks were just going marching up and down the field. The first half, the Seahawks weren't doing that. So if the Panthers defense is full strength here, I would want no part of Minnesota. If the Panthers, come Wednesday, Thursday, that injury report's got 3, 4 starting defenders on it. Okay, well now I'd be a little bit concerned that Cousins is gonna light them up, because the Vikings can move the ball through the air. They're pretty good, and that's where they would ultimately probably win this game. So I'll be looking for a couple things with this one. One, I prefer Dalton at quarterback for the Panthers. If it's young, I'd start to gravitate toward the Vikings. 2, the health of the Panthers defense. If they're full strength, it's Panthers or nothing. If they've got 3 or 4 guys out, well, then I think you can start looking at the Vikings, because that might be too much for the Panthers to overcome.
All right, so we know where to go in Survivor for Week 4 in the NFL. Make sure you guys tune in to the Hustle Show in its entirety every Thursday night at 7 o'clock right here on the Wager Talk YouTube channel as well. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button as well. Get that little bell notification every time that Wager Talk TV and the Hustle Show get you guys some great information. We certainly appreciate you guys following along. Drop some comments in the comment section. Let us know what you think about our Survivor selections here. For Adam Trigger on Twitter at Top Flight SI, I'm at Mark Zino, MarkZino. Again, Full Hustle Show 48 hours from now, rather, on Wager Talk TV and the Wager Talk YouTube channel. For Adam Trigger, I'm Mark Zino. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, everybody. Go cash some tickets. We'll talk to you tomorrow.